What is the next step for Tommy Lloyd as he tries to take Arizona from being a dominant regular season team into a dominant postseason team?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, we got a lot to get through this show. Tommy Lloyd, as we all know, has been a wildly successful coach during his first 3 years at the University of Arizona. And for the people out there that say they want somebody else, I say rubbish. I say poppycock, because that is not true. You look around college basketball, if Tommy Lloyd were to be let go, he would be unemployed for less than a second. And I ask people this all the time. They get frustrated. I'll say, listen, out of all coaches in college basketball, name me 10 that you'd rather have for the next 10 years. I mean, when you look at it that way, you pretty much know where it's going to be. So there's that. That being said, obviously, Arizona needs to get a little bit better in the NCAA tournament. Now, through his first 2 years, he's made the tournament 3 times. He's had a 1 seed and 2 seeds, and he's made the Sweet 16 twice. So again, it's not like it's all bad, but Arizona does need to step up its performance a little bit. I don't think that there's any secret to that. And a big reason why is when, in the first year where Lloyd played, Wright State in the first round, obviously Arizona didn't look good in the first half and they blew them away. Probably should have lost to TCU. I get that it survived and advanced and then absolutely got annihilated by Houston. That is what it is. Houston would have beat Arizona 30 out of 30 times. So in hindsight, I can't totally, I can't really put that loss on him. But Clemson, there was some Clemson. That was a game that felt like it was very, very winnable for Arizona for a variety of reasons. The first one is that Arizona was an 8-point favorite. When you're an 8-point favorite, you should generally be able to beat the team that you are playing because you are a significant favorite. And Arizona had this. Listen, there's a couple things that I think were a little bit frustrating. Obviously, Arizona came out really slow, but then after that, Clemson also allowed Arizona to basically dared Arizona to shoot 3-pointers, and Arizona obliged and said, yes, we will shoot 3-pointers. We will shoot as many of them as possible, and obviously those didn't go in. Brownell basically said that that was their plan. And their plan was to hope that Arizona was going to shoot threes. They did, and Arizona lost. So Arizona, though, when you look at this roster, there's a bunch of different things that Arizona needs for next year to be able, I think, to mitigate some of these issues. The first one is you need some pure shooters. Again, and there's a variety of different things, but you need some pure shooters. Not only do you need pure shooters, you need guys who can, when the going gets tough, can get to the free throw line. Arizona, for a number of years now, 3 years at least, has had guards that cannot get to the free throw line, point guards that cannot get to the free throw line. And that is an issue. Not only is that an issue, that's a problem, to put it mildly. And listen, when Kylan Boswell shoots 1 free throw a game, that's just not good enough. That's just not good enough. And not only is it not good enough, it is a spot where you're like, that just shows that you've got point guards that can't penetrate. And not only do you have point guards that can't penetrate, and that's just always going to be an issue, because when the game slows down, you need guys that can get into the paint. Look at, just look at some of these teams out here. They're not totally relying on 3-point shots. I thought a big thing for Tommy Lloyd was getting guys who can make that next step, who can, listen, the shot isn't falling and I can get to the free throw line. And that's why Jaden Bradley was so good for Arizona. And not only was he so good for Arizona, he was somebody that I think Arizona fans can look at and say, yeah, that's a dude going forward. That is a big time player going forward. And you're going to need a lot more dudes like Jaden Bradley, because Jaden Bradley was that dude who, what's weird is nobody really thinks of him as a 3-point shooter, but when the chips are down, he was able to make 3-point shots. And his percentage this year, 40%, pretty good. And again, when Arizona needed buckets, he was the one that was able to get into the lane, and he was the one that embraced the moment. And not only embraced the moment, he was the guy who was able to, get past his guy, be physical. And it was just something, it was weird because it's something that Arizona hasn't had now in 3 years. And I think that's something that you kind of look at as an Arizona fan. You're like, it's just weird because, growing up, with growing up, you're watching Damon Stoudemire, you're watching Mike Bibby, you're watching Jason Terry. These are all guys that, could basically leave their imprint all over a basketball game, and Arizona hasn't had that. So Jaden Bradley, to me, has to be the starting point guard. He has to be told that he is the starting point guard going into the season. I believe that he has earned that spot. And listen, if he comes back and he lays a total egg, then we'll reevaluate where everything is. But I also believe that he has earned that spot. And so that, to me, has to be the starting point guard. And honestly, and I don't even know anybody that's even close to that. It has to be the starting point guard. Now, next guy up, Kylan Boswell. If Kylan Boswell wants to come back in a backup secondary role, I'm fine with that. Listen, it kind of eliminates one need, but I can't go into the year with Kylan Boswell as the starter. This past year was just bad. For, again, a variety of reasons. You wonder how seriously Kylan took it because, everybody's seen the pictures. Everybody knows Kylan enjoys the party life for sure. But then you also know that he's also the player that was kind of the weak link all year. I mean, how many times out there was Kylan Boswell not only the worst player for Arizona, he was the worst player on the court. That can't happen. And so that's got to be an issue. And I believe that Tommy Lloyd didn't do the kid any services by saying that you can by not really disciplining him. Discipline is one of the few things that a coach has over all of his players. And as far as playing minutes and whatnot, and that was never really exercised with Kylan Boswell, and I think that was a little bit of a disservice. And that's something that I think going forward has to be the case. It's okay to have some tough love with a player, and I think this is probably going to be a little bit of a learning experience for Tommy Lloyd. At least I hope it's a little bit of a learning experience because, again, Lloyd is a great coach. There's no doubt about it. But if an 18-year-old believes that he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, that is going to be a problem. And that obviously bore itself out against pretty much this entire season where you had a player that was doing essentially whatever he wanted. That's just not going to cut it. That's just not going to cut it. I mean, that's the best way it is. So accountability is a huge thing for me, especially in the backcourt. And then after that, I think you also have got to start talking about guys that can penetrate and get to the basket, some tougher players. The next one up then is KJ Lewis. KJ Lewis is, I thought, another guy that probably should have played a little bit more. KJ Lewis was very, very good, and he is going to fit in very, very well for what Arizona wants to do. By the way, a nice little endorsement or NIL deal he got with KFC, I believe. Very, very good. I love KFC, one of my favorite places to eat. But KJ has to have a massive role on next year's team, and we're going to talk about that next. But first, LinkedIn, my friends. LinkedIn. Okay, check it out. LinkedIn. All right, here's the deal with LinkedIn. Everybody knows somebody that got a job through LinkedIn. You might have got a job through LinkedIn. You might have known a buddy that got a job through LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/college. Again, there's a reason that LinkedIn has been around. There's a reason that everybody uses LinkedIn because it works. And that's why you want to have LinkedIn. Again, one of these spots where you will thank me later. If you haven't used it, what are you doing? You could be getting great jobs. You could be getting great looks at possible employers. This is where it's at. Again, check it out. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Post your job for free. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now KJ Lewis, that's the embodiment of what you need in the Big 12. Not only is it the embodiment of what you need in the Big 12, this is an NBA player. NBA talent matters. NBA talent matters. And you have to have players that are NBA talents. And KJ Lewis is certainly an NBA talent. He's somebody that I think the recruiting service is definitely messed up on. You watch him, that's what a starting shooting guard in the NBA looks like physically. And he just kind of had a real knack for basketball. And I think that's what's enticing about him is that he has a real knack for basketball. He was always around the ball. He was able to get into traffic. He was able to create problems. And he did it with a passion, a physicality that I think was all too lacking a little bit on these teams. And that's something that I think Arizona's got to be able to rectify, is when you needed more dudes like KJ Lewis. KJ Lewis was a dog. Now, listen, Pelle Larsson did some really good things for Arizona, but Pelle Larsson also, he would leave you wondering from time to time what exactly is going on there. And when Pelle Larsson was bad, Arizona was generally really, really bad. And that is something that I think needs to be rectified, because you can't have fourth, fifth year seniors that when the going gets tough, you generally weren't there. Now, again, he had a good game against Dayton for sure, but when Arizona got knocked out against Houston, obviously he was terrible. Against Princeton, he was really bad, and then he was really bad in this past game. That when you have a player of that, of that type of, responsibility, you got to be better than that. KJ Lewis, I think, just has a little bit of a dog that I'm not sure that some of these other players on the team did. I think this will be KJ Lewis's last year in college, but I think we're going to enjoy it. And a big reason why is I think he's going to be able to get to the free throw line. And that's another thing. You've got to be able to get to the free throw line when the game slows down. When the game slows down, you've got to have players that can get to the line, and I believe that he is going to be able to do that. I think he's going to fit in very, very well with Josan Seinon as far as being able to just get to the free throw line. So again, those are three players that I think you're probably looking at as being your starting perimeter. Now, we're going to talk about players that, it could be in the portal that you might be getting a little bit more of a look at going forward, and we'll find out more about that. But right now on paper, I think you're probably looking at a Jaden Bradley, Josan Seinon, and a KJ Lewis, players like that. And, some people are comparing Josan Seinon to Jacoby Walter. And listen, if you're like the Baylor kid, I will take that every single day of the week, as should anybody else. Now, I think a couple other players that you need to obviously keep an eye on to a certain degree are especially on the perimeter, when what's going to happen with them is obviously you also have somebody in Jamari Phillips coming in. I like Jamari Phillips. Now, listen, Jamari hasn't played a ton of high school basketball the last year, kind of bounced around a little bit, but he can score at all three levels. I'm excited to see what he can do, and I think he's got a little bit of a dog in him that Arizona players haven't necessarily had. So there's somebody else as well. And then moving up front, listen, with your Philly Bees, your Paulius Morauskas, these were guys who were probably not going to be able to play this year. And I think it was actually kind of a good thing from Tommy Lloyd to be able to show that he was able to make some of those tough decisions that, I can't just have a lot of roster filler. And again, I think that there was some roster filler on this squad. And I'm cool with having a player or two like that, but I can't have four players where I'm going into a season saying, man, there's no way they're going to play. And with Morauskas, with Philly B, with Conrad, those are a lot of guys that probably were not going to be able to play at Arizona, so they obviously moved on. But the players that are going to stay, obviously Mount Crevis up front. I think Mount Crevis can be a monster here at the U of A. He feels very much like the player that is, he feels very much like the player that Gonzaga gets, where it takes him a year or two, and then by the time he is a junior, he's an All-American. He's 7'2". He's 240 pounds. I know that it frustrates some people with that. He feels looks like he's kind of weak at times. He gets knocked over easily. I think a lot of that is going to be corrected with Chris Rounds in the weight room. and just getting stronger physically and just getting more confident of himself. I know the coaching staff thinks he's a stud, and I think there's a lot of reason to believe that he's going to be a very good player for Arizona. I think he's another one, just needs a little bit of time. I think once that's all played out, I think he's going to be very good for the University of Arizona. Now, another dude that I'm big on, obviously, Dylan Anderson. Dylan Anderson, Arizona's going to use him as that stretch four. And Dylan has spent a lot of time working on that three-point shot, and Dylan can shoot the ball. Dylan can rain threes. I know it's funny to say, but Dylan can rain threes, and I think Dylan can be a real problem for teams that Arizona's going against, mainly because he's confident shooting the three, and Dylan's a big dude. Listen, he's not a super athlete. He's never going to be a super athlete, but he's also not a stiff. And when he shoots threes, he looks like he knows that ball is going in. He's confident doing it, and he's big. He's not a stick. He's 6'10", 6'11", 245. His body's really taken to the weights. I think he's going to be really, really good for Arizona this coming year. And then another one that Arizona is bringing back, I have really no clue what to think about it, but I know that Tommy Lloyd likes him, is Henry Vasar. Now, Arizona lacks athleticism on the front court, obviously, with those three. And we're going to get to the power forward position here in a second. But the one thing that Vasar has going for it that can mitigate a little bit of that is that Vasar is a natural shot blocker. Now, I don't know how good Vasar is ever going to be, but he is a natural shot blocker. And if you're going to miss on somebody, you're probably going to miss on somebody that's 7 foot tall. So that's obviously a thing that Tommy Lloyd is keeping certainly in his back pocket. But that's who you're going to miss with. If you're going to miss with somebody that's 7 feet tall and can move and run up and down the court, then you're going to do that. Vasar is that dude, though. He is and we'll find out. Maybe he's not good. I tend to believe, I don't know that I necessarily see him contributing a ton, but we'll find out. He could turn out to be a pretty good player. I'm going to take Tommy's judgment on that. And the reason that, and again, I love Umar Ballo, leader of men, but the thing with Umar Ballo is that if you brought back Umar, you're probably going to lose Dylan Anderson, and you're probably going to lose, Mount Crevis, because Umar Ballo would play 35, 38 minutes a game. If it means that I can get 2 years of those dudes as opposed to 1 year Umar, as much as I like Umar, I am going to ride with 2 years of those guys, because I think that's just a better, I think that's just better for the team long term, especially as you transition into the Big 12. So again, I would be very surprised, because I think if Umar comes back, those dudes leave. As much as you'd like Umar back, you got to realize the practicality that is college basketball at this point. So I think right now you're looking at 4 guys. And again, there's going to be more roster movement, but I think you're looking at 4 guys that are pretty much guaranteed to start. In that, Jaden Bradley, at least you hope, Jaden Bradley, KJ Lewis, Josan Sanon, and then up front you got Mount Crevis. Then there's got to be a very logical person that you're bringing in there as well, and we're going to get to that on the other side. But another guy that listen, we got to talk about some of the recruits as well. Carter Bryant is going to be an NBA player. Carter Bryant is going to play in the NBA. And not only is he going to play in the NBA, he's going to play in the NBA for a long time. But Carter Bryant, again, he's a young kid. He's, you watch him physically, he can do a lot of things. He's got a really good feel for the game. He can pass the ball. He can score, but he's also physically, he's young. And that's where I think with the COVID years now, you got to keep in mind that with the COVID years, things change a little bit, because you've got 23 and 24-year-olds that are in their 5th, 6th year of college. I mean, heck, you look at Jermaine Cousinard, and he was 26 years old this past year. That changes things. Carter Bryant is an 18-year-old. He looks like an 18-year-old physically, and that's not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, it's a good thing, because it also goes to show you, too, that he is probably going to have a much higher upside than somebody, say, like a Stanley Johnson, who came in and was already physically maxed. But again, I think Carter's probably in a little bit of a KJ role this next year, where he plays 15, 16 minutes per game. But by the time he's a sophomore, he's an absolute monster, and then he heads off to the NBA. But we're going to talk about one thing that Arizona desperately needs. But first, eBay Motors, my friend. eBay Motors, millions of parts for your MVP. Win every time with parts that fit your ride. eBay Motors. Listen, in this day and age, you don't want to get screwed over by the middleman. You want to be able to cut out the middleman and say, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to cut out the middleman and I am going to make this decision for myself, and you'll be the better person for it. Check it out. eBay Motors, millions of parts for your MVP. Win every time with parts that fit your ride. Again, this is the time where, we're in the year 2024. Get something that fits your personality. Get something that fits what you want to do with your life. Again, eBay Motors has you covered, and you can get these parts and you can take it to somebody you trust. Millions of parts for your MVP. Again, win every time with parts that fit your ride. You will thank me on this one again later. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. All right, another thing, a big thing that Arizona needs to get is an athletic power forward. An athletic power forward because, listen, up front, we talked about it. This is a good lineup. It's a good lineup, but you've got to be able to get somebody. I mean, heck, it's got to be a Keyshawn Johnson type, maybe somebody with a little bit more energy, but either way, a Keyshawn Johnson type. And that's athletic, that's strong, and they can play an undersized 5 if he needs to. But going into the Big 12, you're going to have a lot of dudes who are 6'6", 6'6", 6'7", 230 pounds that can all jump, that are super athletic. You're going to need something to be able to combat that. And I think with Arizona, they don't really have that on the roster. And I know that the coaching staff, that is something they're going to prioritize, and that's something too you ought to understand with Arizona. They should be able to get somebody like that, because Tommy Lloyd told Keyshawn Johnson that you come in here and you're going to be allowed to shoot threes. You're going to be allowed to shoot threes. And not only are you going to be allowed to shoot threes, you're going to be allowed to showcase a part of your game that could possibly get you to the NBA. And they were able to do just that. So that should be an attractive option. You want to get an athletic 4-man in here that can make some of that work. And I think that there's every reason to indicate that they can. Listen, the parts here are for a very, very good 2024-25 Arizona basketball team are there. But the roster has to continue to be overhauled. And a big part of this, again, is the accountability factor. You've got to have players that you can hold accountable. And that, again, that means that sometimes there's going to be some tough love in play, and that's okay. But that, when you've got a talented team, we're also in the year 2 of 2024 where you're not giving out charity minutes. You're giving out minutes to players that absolutely deserve it, and Arizona's got to be able to do that. And I think, like I said, that's a big part of the learning curve for Tommy Lloyd. He's the man, obviously, going forward. Everybody knows Tommy Lloyd is a beast. But you got to be able to have, again, dudes that know that, hey, man, if I screw up here, I might get some playing time docked from me, as opposed to, well, I can pretty much do whatever I want and playing time will never be taken away from me. That's where it's at. Think about it this way. If you're a basketball player and you know that you can do whatever you want, and that might just result in a yelling or some extra suicides behind the scene, in practice, you're not going to really adhere to that, because, again, the thing that really matters to you is playing time. So, again, that's the next thing that I think Tommy Lloyd has to be able to get. But I also have no reason to believe that he won't get that as well, because, like I said, he's a fairly reflective guy. All right, now, we're going to come back tomorrow. We're also going to start talking a little bit Arizona football, because, as you all know, we are a football school as well. But on that note, though, very much appreciate you guys making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Again, going to come back tomorrow. Going to talk some Arizona basketball, some Arizona football, keep you in the loop on everything. Bear down, back the A. Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day.